Good morning. It's great that you could join us for our service today. It's March 17th, or it will be March 17th when you actually get to see this. It's my great privilege today to have Jon Hill visiting with us. I worked with Jon for over 10 years while I was at Ray of Hope and knew him for a few years ahead of time when I was on the board. Jon has served at Ray of Hope longer than anybody else in its history. I think well over 40 years now, in a variety of different roles. And it's always been a blessing to work with Jon and just to see his passion for the Lord and for his work, no matter what he was asked to do or called to do. And so as I was planning for, through services through the springtime, I had spoken to Jon about coming and sharing a bit about Ray of Hope and what's going on these days. Certainly it's changed a bit because now the COVID thing has come up, and so there'll be some different information that he's going to share with us. But Jon, I just want to welcome you and thank you for coming to speak to the people of Grace. I know as a church we support the ministry of Ray of Hope, and we're a community that cares. And so I think that's part of the reason why we're engaged with Ray of Hope. And so I'll kind of turn it over to you and give you the floor, so to speak. And God bless you as you speak to us today.
Hey, thank you very much, Harry. I'm really pleased to be able to share with you, and it is very strange times talking here from my home office. Very strange, but I'm getting used to it from many Zoom meetings and so on. Yeah, I've been at Ray of Hope for quite a while and worked with the homeless for about 19 years now. So I've worked in a couple of the other facilities before that, but now with the homeless for a while. And after a couple of years of working with the homeless, I just got a real passion to help the church, help the Christian community to understand just what's really going on out there, because so many of us, even me working with young offenders, did not see this level of stuff going on just in Waterloo region, and that's what I focus on a lot. I'm just going to read a couple of things because we are in a pandemic. This is kind of history making. It's, we kind of read about world wars and influenza and bubonic plague and stuff, but we've never lived one, and here we are living it. How does that affect the most vulnerable, the homeless? Well, we see a devastating effect on the aged people that are in the long-term care homes. It's just devastating. But what about the homeless? Well, it affects them in a different way. And I'm just going to read a couple of things that I have written down here. A statement from one of the shelter workers that works in the shelter with the homeless calls it a horror on top of horror. It's already horrible to live homeless, to be without the financial needs, just your basic need. And you add to that now that all the places that you could go, the public places, 80% of all the public buildings are closed. And for you and me, public buildings coming and going is good, but for them, it's their washroom. It's the only place they can wash their hands. And so they use that to get out of the elements and so on. They're all closed. And places that used to maybe just ask for money, there's nobody there now. All that kind of, so there's all kinds of things like that. Food hampers that they would go to get food. Those food hampers, 70% of them in Waterloo region are closed. 80% of the buildings are closed. If you try to donate something, go ahead and try. It's really hard. People won't take it because who knows if it's contaminated or not. You may not think that you're, asymptomatic, but you could still be passing, so they won't accept any donation. Now, at Ray of Hope, we will still accept financial donations online. We will still accept food donations, so we are still doing meals. Yep. We can be glad that we live in a community. This is some things I wrote down because of course, I'm following it because I'm very passionate for the homeless. But we can be glad we live in a community that has taken such steps and initiatives, like the bus station. They have opened, so it's a temporary shelter. It's open 24/7 for washroom, shelter. It's not for sleeping, but people will fall asleep there. A.R. Kaufman Y, it has been open 24/7 to help with social distancing and washrooms. Ray of Hope, well, we can't let people come in for a meal anymore. So what we've done is we keep the meals going, but instead of putting them on a plate, and serving them to people, we're putting them in a takeout container. So we have a number of takeout containers in a bag, and basically at the door, we are handing out a bag, and it's a full, nutritious, hot meal at 7 o'clock every night on the weekdays, 12 o'clock. We're just keeping to our same times, but all we're doing is handing out a takeout.
Adapting.
Yeah, adapting. And so on top of that, Ray of Hope is now providing meals for St. John's. So we provide the meal we make the meal and provide it, and then take it down to St. John's so that they don't have to come into the building. They basically can do the same thing at lunchtime. And so for five days a week, we're looking after them that way. We also have opened it up individual, one person at a time, for laundry. So people could come in to get their meal, go get their laundry started, come out, get their meal, maybe sit down on the step and eat it. And then by the time the wash is done and so on. So they're working that out. They have washroom and they have the laundry. But all of our other programs, we have like 29 programs going on just for the homeless. And they're all shut down except for a couple like that. So the other thing is St. John's Ambulance has a trailer, and it is going around to wherever these things are happening. So they have one when St. John's is open, they'll have it there. Every time we're open, they have it there. And it's basically for primary care, but it's also primarily there to do, what do they call it? I've got it written down here because I can't remember all these things, but they call it primary care and COVID assessment for pre-testing. So they're doing pre-testing for COVID assessment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a neat thing that they stepped up. House of Friendship, it's tight. I don't know if anybody's been there, but if you've ever been there, you see 4 guys in a little room. And I look at that bedroom and think that's the same size as the bedroom my wife and I have. And it's like, oh my goodness, 4 guys in there. There's no social distance. There's not 6 feet between them.
Yeah.
So they realized right away, we can't stay open and adapt to what the world is going through right now. So they immediately closed it down and moved into the Radisson Hotel. So some deal that they've worked out with the Radisson, every person gets their own room. And that way they're all looked after. The food is brought along and provided. And the idea is you've got everything you need there. You got a washroom, you got a little fridge, you got a balcony, you got a bed, even a TV that they probably haven't had. So it's kind of nice that way. But some of them, it would be hard. It's like being in prison, and there's no way that they'll want to stay in prison. So it's very difficult. But so I'm not sure of all the semantics there and exactly how that works. But that's what they're doing now. But because of these quick actions, Waterloo Region has only had 1 homeless person tested positive for COVID. And
that's
that person,
incredible.
that person right away was taken and isolated and dealt with fairly quickly, and I mean, made sure that they were well looked after. And that was over a month ago, which means that they did not pass it on to somebody that they might have been around, which is a good thing. Now in Toronto, there are 90 different homeless people, and they're really concerned that this is going to get out of hand. So they have 12 hotels with 100 rooms in each hotel. So they got 1,200 rooms ready for people. And I know that some of them are filled, not all of them yet. They also had 110 test positive in one refugee shelter. So that kind of shows you how, once it gets in there, it spreads. And so they're trying to control that. But so I'd like to show you some slides about what I'm really passionate about, which is basically just getting the information out about what's going on in Waterloo Region. Okay, so this is Ray of Hope, you know, people investing in people, inspiring hope, transforming lives. So Ray of Hope, you know, we demonstrate the love of Christ. This is one of the neat things about Ray of Hope is we have kept Christ in it. And it's quite hard sometimes with a community service organization. You hear about lots of them starting out as a very strong Christian venture, and then they're struggling to keep Christ in it. And even while Harry was there, made sure we kept Christ in it, and each executive director working through to make sure that the very origin of what we started it for is there. And what does God command us to do? Well, I'll just throw out a couple of scriptures here that Deuteronomy talks about commanding you to open your hand wide to the poor and needy. So it's a command right in the Bible. The one I think probably best describes Ray of Hope is 2 Corinthians 1:4. You can read it there. God who comforted us in our trouble, so that we may comfort those who are in any trouble, with this same comfort. So what God has done in our own lives, it's so that we can be there and partner with God in helping others to get the same help and comfort that we had. So what does Ray of Hope do? Well, I'll try and, in the sense of time, in the sense of being very careful with time, 4 different areas: youth justice, youth addiction, youth employment, community service. So these are just some of the things: 7 locations, 11 service areas, 41 programs, 170 paid employees. A lot of those are part-time. 2,200 volunteers, because we cannot do this ourselves. So the youth justice, we have 3 youth justice programs, 4 addiction programs, 2 employment programs, and a number of community support programs. What is really going on in Waterloo Region? Why do we have all those? Well, poverty in Waterloo Region, you may not know this, but 73,000. Now these stats are a couple of years old, are based on LICO, L-I-C-O, you see there, which is low income cutoff. And there's a whole lot of things that means, but the one that really sticks out for most people to really narrow it down is, if you're spending 50% or more of your income on rent, then you are unsustainably housed. Because if you were to get laid off or get injured or have a problem with health, sickness, yeah, you might get your job back, but you'll always be playing catch up. It'll be hard to ever catch back up and get your bills paid off. So it's not sustainable. The other thing is the 2,500 homeless. It's like, what? That many? There's that many? Well, stop and think about it. We have 250 beds in shelters. Those are not homes. That's where you go to a place like House of Friendship or Mary's Place, YWCA, or Safe Haven or Argus House, or any of those places. You put them all together, there's 250 of them. And that's basically just a place to stay while you're looking for a place. So where are the other 2,000 living, sort of thing? And it's like, well, they're couch surfing and living different places. The living outside, the 300, we call it living rough. And those are people that are actually living outside. They're trying to get help. Ontario Works is our kind of you might have understood it as welfare. It's now called Ontario Works. Ontario Works pays $733 a month to do that. You stop and look at a room in a rooming house is $600 a month, and a bus pass is almost $100. Leaves you nothing for personal needs, much less food. So I kind of look at this and say, my goodness, how on earth is a person ever going to live? And to get that $733, oh yeah, you need an address. Well, how do you get an address? Well, you need money to put on rent to get an address. Well, it's like this circle of poverty that you can't break into. There is one little crack there. It's called well, if you can find a landlord who will sign an intent to rent form, then it says, I intend to rent this to this person, then you can get the money. Otherwise, you're stuck with the $200, which they call street money, once a month. Well, you can't live on that. So if you're on disability, it's $11.50. That's pretty hard to live on too in this day and age. But I stop and look at that, and a lot of people are pretty shocked by this next slide, because it tells a story of Canada, which is not so nice. And that is that if we're getting $733 a month, if you're on OW today, what was it 28 years ago? Now, 28 years is a pretty substantial amount of time. So you're looking way back. I think you could probably agree with me that most food was half the price it is today. Most houses or rent was half the price it is today, probably more than that. But let's look at what were we paying people 28 years ago in the same situation? $891 a month. 28 years ago, that's what they got. It kept going down. Yes, it was the common sense resolution with Mike Harris, but each different government that got in continued to bring it down. So it didn't matter what party it was, they continued to bring it down because everybody seemed to look at this as a behavior problem, not a mental health problem or things that people can't control in trying to get jobs and so on. Finally, in 1996, they realized that, okay, maybe this is wrong. Maybe we have gone too far. Okay, so we'll stop at $690 a month and we'll start going up. So every year they've gone up. And you stop and say, did they really change anything? Stop and think about that. 1996, that was what, 24 years ago. It was $6.90, and today it's $7.33. So here we are 24 years later, and it's only $43 more a month. To me, that's a lower number. It may look bigger, but the value is much lower. So it's really kind of a mess. And what's the cost? So let me just share with you what the actual cost is. Well, here's some people. This is one of the bridges where people just leave their stuff, and that's where they sleep at night. But what's the real cost in financial dollars and emotional, people's psyche? Let's stop and look at this next slide. Tells you actually in Waterloo region, for every single person that we saved those $2,000, no, hold it, $2,000 a year, we saved $2,000 a year from the OW cost. What did it actually cost Waterloo region? Well, let's look at the average. The average for those 300 people that live outside, it costs you and me, the taxpayer, $42,536 a year per person. So you stop and say, oh my goodness, what? How is it costing $42,000? This chart over here is a little hard to see because of the lettering, but it's 10 years old too. It's 2010, and it was a chart just showing where the amounts of money are being spent and what the average is. And there was a man who the Grand River Hospital contacted the housing umbrella group, so we call it HUG. It's many different groups that get together about housing issues. And they said, by the way, we just want to let you know about this man. He was in the hospital 68 times in 1 year. That was 2009. And the average visit, if you or I go to the hospital just once, you go to the hospital once, back then it was $945. Today I'm told it's $1,300. So if you have something, an emergency, and you rush into the hospital, you're looked after by a doctor and you leave, the average cost is $1,300 per visit, just with all the administration and doctors and nurses. Well, he went 68 times. So you stop and say, like, okay, this is $1,300 a month now, but back then it was around $1,000. That's $68,000. How many times did he go once he was housed? They housed him at what was called SHOW, Supportive Housing of Waterloo in Waterloo. 1 year later, the hospital contacted HUG and said, by the way, this guy was in the hospital twice. So we just saved $66,000 on one person in one area because we housed him. And it cost us maybe $10,000 to house him. So it's financially smart to house every one of these people. We're the ones that are going to save the money in taxes, much less them feeling better about themselves and having a place to call their own and get away. What's really going on today, though? Has anybody heard of, well, actually, this is a comprehensive, the last comprehensive survey. So it's, where does that number come from? 300 homeless, or living rough. And this was a team of 88 volunteers on 22 teams at 3 o'clock in the morning, going out to all the highways and byways, the places that, these are people that work with the homeless and some that don't. And basically one person on each of the teams knows where the homeless, well, where Tent City is, where the bridges are that they hide under, the bushes that they hide in, and different places that they stay to try and get out of the weather. And went to all of those places and found, now we could have counted more. We actually had about a little over 300, but we could only count 284 because they first had to allow you to take their picture and answer 19 questions, so we'd learn something. And basically only 284 of them allowed that. The picture was so that we didn't duplicate them and so that we could house them, because Waterloo Region government is awesome. They said, whatever number you give us, that is going to be our commitment. We are going to be committed to housing that many people. So it was 284 people. Great, we're housing 284. We need that picture to show what they're like a year later when we house them. And basically, did they do it? Well, they housed 355 people. But in that year, 15 months that they housed 355, there were over 300 more homeless. Numbers are higher now. This is from Regional Councillor Elizabeth Clark. She says in September, the numbers are higher now than when we started 16 months ago. More people are being evicted from affordable $600, $700 a month when these high rises are being bulldozed. So we read in the paper constantly about this big, beautiful high rise of 100 or 300 units going up. Isn't that wonderful? Good for gentrification, good for stopping the urban sprawl. It makes sense. It's a really wonderful community growing. But every time I read those articles, I see replaces 2 lodging houses, replaces 3 lodging houses. And I think, oh no, another few families or individuals, now their place is bulldozed. They're evicted, no fault of their own. And where do they go? You know of a place that's $700 or $800 a month? Tell me. I have 100 people ready to go and get it today. So it's like it's bulldozed. It's gone forever. It doesn't pop up anywhere else. Now there's an even worse thing going on. What's worse than that? I'll tell you what's worse. Here's what's worse. Have you heard of ghost houses? These are ghost houses. This is a new thing. And it's basically become so big that this woman, Lilani Farha, is the UN's special rapporteur. Anyhow, she's a woman who basically went around and started to look at absolutes, actual situations happening about the ghost houses. You can see you can go onto YouTube and type in Push 2009 official trailer, documentary, I think is what it's called, and see what's really going on. She gives stats that are staggering. Here, I'll show you some of the stats. But it's basically, it's one of those things, if you bought a house a year ago and you want to sell it today, you bought it a year ago, today you can sell it for 18% more if there's nobody in it. So a lot of homes are no longer for people. They're for a commodity, they're for finance. Because you buy a house a year ago, yeah, you have to pay the property taxes, heat, hydro, more insurance because there's nobody there, but that amounts to about 2 to 3% of the cost. You still have another 15% that you earn because the average house today in Waterloo region is worth 18% more than it was a year ago. So here we are with these houses that are empty. Sorry. So let's take a look here. What's happening in Waterloo? Waterloo region has 8.7% of our homes are ghost houses. They're empty on purpose. Across Canada, 1.34 million ghost houses. These big, dark, empty buildings, and they're making money. And yet we have a waiting list of 4,500 families needing housing that will take 15 years to fill. And we're losing affordable units every day because of this trend. Largest landlord in Canada, the Starlight. In the US, it's Blackstone. Check it out. Go in, when you type in ghost houses, yeah, I know you get the haunted houses, but you type in ghost houses real estate and you can look at this. But the best thing is watch the movie Push, P-U-S-H. And I can give Harry the link to it if anybody can't find it. But it's pretty easy on YouTube. The whole movie is on there. Steve Paikin put it on the other night about a month ago on the TVO channel, so you can look it up on TVO.
Yeah, John, I'll get that and I'll send it out to people in an email so they can be sure to be able to find it.
See it for yourself. Now, this pandemic may change some of that. I've already heard stuff about Airbnbs that are getting closed and rented out now. Because they're not going to make any money. They're losing money big time. So they're going to rent them out instead of having Airbnbs, which, I mean, Airbnbs, they seem like a good thing. For the wealthy, they are. But for the poor, what happens with an Airbnb? Well, there's 1,200 Airbnbs in Waterloo region, and 800 of them are homes that are no longer homes. They're money makers. So it's basically an Airbnb. The problem with it is it's for people that come in out of town. But this, they were a home for somebody. So you've just taken 800 homes out of the inventory of housing. This is a scripture verse that caught my attention. It's talking about a, wonderful sort of thing in Isaiah 5. But it ends with this statement that God is looking for justice and finding oppression. He's looking for righteousness, and he finds a cry for help. Truly, many houses shall be desolate, great and beautiful ones without inhabitant. I thought that's describing us today. And you can read Isaiah 5, you know, the first verse to the 9th to get the context, but it's basically, this is kind of a modern day way of oppressing people. And what happens when people end up living rough? Well, I don't know if you've heard, but Waterloo Region has the highest opioid addiction per capita in all of Ontario. It's basically the worst place to be in all of Ontario for an opioid crisis, and it's gone up. What are the numbers? I remember being the director with Harry was there back in 2013. I think we heard of one case. In 2014, it was up to about 9 cases. And now take a look at these numbers. Just outrageous. And last May, we had the highest ever, 11 dead in 1 month. And then you compare it, 4.1 people die every day from opioid overdose in Ontario. And compare that with 1.8 in motor vehicle accidents. So it kind of gives you a sense of, yeah, this is getting out of hand. So this does need to be dealt with. And our schools, just take a look at these things, you know, stats and stuff. I look at the alcohol and the cannabis, and it's not so much that, but I look at, you know, 83%, 42%. This is in 2016. This is before marijuana was even considered to be legalized. And back then, this many kids were doing these things. It's not the alcohol, it's not the cannabis. It's kind of the Bible talks about it as the attitude toward lawlessness. Lawlessness will increase, and here we can see it. Then we legalized it in September, marijuana in September 2018 as a country. And what happened? Well, let's look at Waterloo Region only. In our schools, 25% increase in violence, 80% increase in expulsions. Well, may not be related to marijuana, I don't know, but I have my suspicions. Anyhow. So then I have this verse in the Bible about the sin of Sodom. In Ezekiel, you can look it up in 16:49. Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, abundance of idleness, and yet she did not help or strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. So I wiped them out, as you have seen. So you just see the stuff I've got there below. Just our pride. I'm proud of this region. We have done awesome. We've grown. We are the digital technical hub of Canada. We're doing awesome. We have a wonderful region. Waterloo Region's growing and become very well known and all these great things. So we've got a good infrastructure. Oh, and food. Well, what is it? Canadians throw out 58% of their food. And then you go to abundance of idleness, TV, movies, video games. Do we strengthen the hand of the poor and needy? I hope to get as far away from being like Sodom as we can, because I know that as we treat our most vulnerable, that's where we can be judged. And so I hope that we are doing more, and I want to make sure that we are. So that's why I'm passionate about doing things for the poor. I was just in a meeting this morning on Zoom, a Zoom meeting online with the group that's putting this together. We're probably not going to be meeting in the park this year. It sounds like we won't be able to, because that would be a big gathering. We had about 300 or 400 people last year. We can't do that this year. And it was like 300 or 400 people in the park having lots of worship and then spending some time in small groups huddling to pray for specific issues, whether it's our leaders, whether it's our pastors, whether it's the poor, all those different things. This year, I think we'll probably have more of a focus on different things because of the pandemic we're in. And this slide is last year's, as you can see. But we're putting something together that will be able to go to all the churches so that they can put it up and then pray from your own home. I don't think it'll be a Zoom meeting. I don't think it's going to be quite that wide open, because you get a few hundred people on Zoom. I don't think it'll work very well. I think they're going to do something like FaceTime Live or something like that, or church online or something. But anyhow, keep your eye open for praying. We need to pray. This is an opportunity to pray for all kinds of things. So how does Ray of Hope strengthen the hand of the poor and needy? Well, let's look at Ray of Hope. We have the custody facility. So a secure custody facility for young offenders. That's basically where young offenders go to do their time when they've committed a crime, 12 to 17-year-old male. And that is out near Petersburg. And that's been going for, well, 1973 that was built. So it's been around for quite a while. That's where I started back in 1976. working just as a staff member. It's grown well. They have a chapel that is voluntary, so you can the kids can voluntarily go to it. And okay, so our secure custody facility, and also we have an open custody facility which has up to 12 kids. It's just down beside Cameron Heights, and same sort of thing, but with a lower level of crime. Then we have a youth reintegration program, which is basically the kids that are coming out of custody, helping them to succeed in reintegrating back into the community so that they don't reoffend. And it's actually been very successful in lowering reoffending rates. Alternative education we have as well, to take kids that are coming out of custody but are not ready to get back into their old school, or have charges of truancy, expulsion, those kinds of things as well. Then we have the youth addiction programs. So there's a residential one where you can basically come and live there 24/7, and the staff are there to look after things and help you through. It is what they call dry, so there's no drugs allowed of any kind. Day treatment is in our main facility, where kids are just coming in very much like the school hours. So they're coming in, they do their schoolwork, and they are involved with some addiction training as well. And then there's a community-based training, which is in the high schools. Basically, we have 5 staff that are assigned to the 22 high schools, and they'll go into whichever high schools they're assigned to deal with different families. We also have a parent support group. So if you know of anybody that's struggling with a child at home that is involved in drugs and you want some help, well, come to the parent support group. You sit down with other parents that are struggling with the same thing, and we have a counselor who is really good at helping to understand what's going on. And it's not the drugs, it's not even the addiction, it's what is that young person trying to fulfill in their life that they've turned to drugs. You and I all have the same needs as them, but we don't have to turn to drugs for it. So it's a really helpful program. It's 8 weeks long, kind of like a workshop base, so that you learn how to understand, listen to, and maybe get them involved in a program. It doesn't have to be one of our programs, but it could be. Then we have the employment services. So basically, if you know anybody that is at risk of becoming homeless or has barriers to employment, get them to give us a call, get involved. If they're between 16 and 30, so you must be under 30, and basically they can get involved. If any of you has a business that you could maybe like to help us or help these kids, you can connect with us, and you will get the first 10 weeks. Their wages will be completely paid by the government. All you're going to have to pay is the UI and so on, things like that. But you get basically, free wages for that person for 10 weeks. And no, you do not have to hire them after that. Hopefully they are doing well enough and they've learned enough from us that they will be a great employee and stay, and you'll want them to. But yeah, I often go to Matthew 25 because a lot of people talk about homeless and the vulnerable, and they usually use Matthew. What I found interesting about Matthew 25 is, yes, whatever you do for the least of these, but what is really interesting is this was Jesus's last statement to the crowds. And I'm kind of looking at this thinking, if this was my last sermon and I know I'm going to die next week, I'm going to give my life next week, wow, wouldn't I make sure this was the most important sermon? And so I kind of put a lot more emphasis on Matthew 25 maybe needs to be looked at closely, because it's Jesus' last statements to the crowds. 26, 27, 28, those chapters are with the disciples, or the crucifixion, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, the resurrection. So here's what we do in Ray of Hope Community Center. Thanks to Harry for pushing me to get involved and move over to this one. I kind of resisted a bit, but he pushed, and here we are. And it's a really wonderful facility. But we're now serving over 250 people a day when we're open. Obviously, this is not open right now, but it's a beautiful facility. Did a really good job with this, and it turned out very well. 365 days a year. We never closed a day. We've always been open since November 2010. We have 5 services, 16 small groups, 5 spiritual growth opportunities, and 3 medical care. So I haven't got time to go into all those, but there's the marketplace is kind of a nicer way of saying a food hamper. People get so many points for hygiene items, so many points for food, and they can sign up, and it's all basically got rid of the lineups, both in the meals by handing out tickets and in the marketplace for the food hamper. We got rid of that by basically doing it by appointment only. So you only have 5 or 6 people at any one time. Community meal, and then we have a chapel program. We have 5 different spiritual focus groups, and the chapel is once a week on Thursdays. Personal care, that's where we have people come for health. We have 2 nurses that come on 2 different nights, and they're full RNs, and they do primary care. We also have foot care. So we encourage lots of positive relationships through community. Obviously, we can't do this these days because of the pandemic, because of the social distancing. This is not allowed, but it's always a very busy place. We have these different programs and groups that get involved. Person comes because they're hungry. They have no money for food. They get the meal, and then they find out, oh, I can get a free haircut. Oh, I can have a shower. Oh, I can do my laundry. Oh, I can learn to play guitar, piano, drums. Oh, I can learn how to cook and bake in the kitchen. That's Chef B in the one picture where he's taken some people on. He's actually hired a couple. And then this is just a craft group that puts these beautiful displays out on the tables. So we have 29. This is a lot of stuff to look at. I won't go through all of these, but many different programs for people to get involved in, because if they get involved in a small group, it tends to help them to look at maybe there are areas in their life. It also just gives them a sense. I think we started these, Harry, you'll remember back when we started these we only had a couple of these groups, and it was basically a lot of the people that we work with down at the community center, they have been told their whole life they're no good, they're not good enough. And we're basically saying, no, you are good enough. You do count, you are valuable. Get them in one of these small groups and they become valuable because they are doing something that furthers their life and just improves the quality of their life. So we have volunteers. Of course, April was volunteer month, and so we tried to do something. Well, this year was really strange. We just did a little video with about 10 of us, I think, on a Zoom call, and just lots of clapping and stuff because we can't really get a big get together to do anything for them. And these are some of the schools that we get lots of placements, so students are learning how to love and help the poor, the homeless, whether they're people in custody or in one of the addiction programs or here, or in the community center, I should say, lots of those. And then we have fundraisers. Our coldest night of the year is our big fundraiser, and actually did quite well this year. Raised quite a bit of money. We had 700. I know I look back and think 2 months ago we had 750 people together. Are you kidding? And it was only, what, a week or 2 later that suddenly you couldn't have anybody together. You're down to 50. We had 750 all together. The mayor, all the mayors were there. The police chief and the fire chief and so on. So it was really well attended. These are other things that I do. I do Sunday morning service. I do a youth group event, What's for Dinner. I do educational games for youth, do a poverty and homeless awareness discussion. We do tours, outline of Ray of Hope, and street walks to find out what all is out there. And if anybody's interested, I can do any one of those. What can you do? Well, thank you so much for the support that Grace already does, Grace Church already does. Here are some things that you can do, you can get involved in, whether it's praying for us. I have a Monday at 12 noon every single Monday. We have not ever missed one for many months. It's basically just praying for the staff, for the volunteers, for the people coming in. You can come and be involved that way. Financially support us, become a monthly partner, leave a legacy so that there's some money to keep this kind of thing going even after you're gone. Join in advocating for the poor. It's the volunteers that really make this. So hope I haven't been too long there, Harry. I'll turn it back over to you, and sorry for the little interruption there.
That's all right, John. Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your passion, certainly, but also some of the statistics of what goes on in our community. I know I often would go out and talk to pastors about Ray of Hope and our connection to the church. And I often described it to them this way, as we don't want you to support Ray of Hope's ministry. But as Ray of Hope, we always feel that we're in a place to help facilitate and support your ministry as a church. Many of our churches are in the suburbs. Many of our people in our churches live in the suburbs, and they don't rub shoulders with people in poverty. They don't understand the issues. They don't see them needing a meal or needing a place to live. Ray of Hope bridges that gap for us in the church to be able to come down and see the needs, and God really calls us to respond. So thank you very much for being with us today and sharing a bit of our own community with us that we may not really know, and also for just sharing your passion that God's given you for it. We really appreciate that. Let me just pray for you
very much
as we close. And Father, we thank you for Ray of Hope, for its history through over 50 years of reaching out to vulnerable people in our community, whether it's young men and women that are in trouble with the law and are really struggling, needing educational help, needing assistance with addictions and the impact of alcohol and drugs on their lives that are just controlling them. For people that are just poor, that really are struggling to be able to survive in a healthy way with housing or with food, with clothing. Father, we thank you that Ray of Hope is there in that gap in our community. And we thank you that as a church, we can partner with them, not only financially, Lord, but in prayer and even volunteering, as some of our people do. And so we thank you, Lord. I pray especially for John, and especially as well for the team of staff that provide leadership to so many volunteers that are willing to come and engage, to be your hands and your feet, to be the body of Christ in our community. And so I pray for them in their positions of leadership, that you would bless them and continue to strengthen them, especially in these really challenging days. We want you to be honored and glorified by the work of your church, by what we do. And we know that this is something that honors you, that brings Jesus to so many people. So we pray this in his perfect and wonderful name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, John. We really do appreciate this.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We've got 3 more hymns for you. The first one is number 436 from the Blue Hymn Book, Freely, Freely, followed by number 668, I'll Go Where You Want Me to Go, and we'll close it off with a hymn from the United Church's More Voices called My Love Colors Outside the Lines. I hope you enjoy. And please sing along at home.
As he told me to. and knowing the loveless tree. I'll do thy will with a heart sincere. I'll be what you want me to be. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, over mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. My love colors outside the line, exploring paths that few could ever find. And it takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. My love colors outside the lines. There's roads to passage, water into wine. And it takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the lines. My soul wants to color outside the lines. Tear back the curtains, sun come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, and open doors to worlds outside the lines. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the lines. My soul wants to color outside the lines. Tear back the curtains, sun come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, through open doors to worlds outside the lines.
I hope you enjoyed that. Please stay inside, stay safe until we're able to worship all together again. And have a good day.